You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. All the talk today is about Michael Bloomberg, who is not, of course, on the ballot in New Hampshire, but he is certainly on the minds of lots of people after a newly released audio recording of the former New York City mayor reveals him publicly claiming that cops across the country could just use a Xerox description to identify black men suspected of committing crimes. He also admitted that his stop-and-frisk policy targeted minority kids in minority neighborhoods. Here is that audio.
95% of your murderers and murder victims fit in one MO. You can just take the description, Xerox it, and pass it out to all the cops. They are male minorities, 15 to 25. That's true in New York, it's true in virtually every city. And that's where the real crime is. You've got to get the guns out of the hands of the people that get killed. So you want to spend the money, put a lot of cops in the street, put those cops where the crime is, which means in minority neighborhoods. So it's one of the unintended consequences is people say, oh my God, you are arresting kids for marijuana that are all minorities. Yes, that's true. Why? Because we put all the cops in the minority neighborhoods. Yes, that's true. Why we do it? Because that's where all the crime is. And the way you get the guns out of the kids' hands is to throw them against the wall and frisk them. And then they say, oh, I don't want that. I don't want to get caught, so they don't bring the gun. They still have a gun, but they leave it at home.
Folks, this was a statement released today by Mike Bloomberg. First of all, that audio was uncovered by journalist Benjamin Dixon. We'll talk to him in a moment. But here's the statement from Mike Bloomberg. Go to my iPad, please. February 11th, 2020. President Trump's deleted tweet is the latest example of his endless efforts to divide Americans. I inherited the police practice of stop and frisk, and as part of our effort to stop gun violence, it was overused. By the time I left office, I cut it back by 95%, but I should have done it faster and sooner. I regret that, and I have apologized. And I have taken responsibility for taking too long to understand the impact it had on Black and Latino communities. But this issue and my comments about it do not reflect my commitment to criminal justice reform and racial equity. I believe we need to end mass incarceration, and during my tenure, we reduced incarceration by 40% and juvenile confinement by more than 60%. We created the Young Men's Initiative to help young men of color stay on track for success, which President Obama built on to create My Brother's Keeper. And we overhauled a school system that had been neglecting and underfunding schools in Black and Latino communities for too long. In contrast, President Trump inherited a country marching towards greater equality and divided us with racist appeals and hateful rhetoric. The challenge of the moment is clear. We must confront this president and do everything we can to defeat him. The president's attack on me clearly reflects his fear over the growing strength of my campaign. Make no mistake, Mr. President, I am not afraid of you, and I will not let you bully me or anyone else in America. Between now and November, I will do everything I can to defeat you, whether I am on the ballot or not. Joining us right now, again, is the man who last night around 8 p.m. released this audio recording, got his hand on the transcripts, Benjamin Dixon. He is host of the Benjamin Dixon Show podcast. Benjamin, it's interesting because today people have been saying, oh, this guy's a big-time Bernie Sanders supporter, but that doesn't negate, though, the uncovering of the audio. First of all, when were you made aware of this audio and the transcripts? Because and explain to people exactly where it came from. Where was he speaking when this was recorded?
Right. So this was 2015 at the Aspen Institute. Bloomberg requested immediately afterwards that this audio, or rather the video, be blocked, according to the Aspen Times. So he knew as soon as he spoke it that it was problematic.
So let me hold you right there. So the Aspen Institute, typically those sessions are on the record. So you're saying after he spoke, then he said, hey,
Yes.
do not put that out?
Yes, according to the Aspen Times, he made the request directly of the Aspen Institute, and their justification was that they usually acquiesce to whatever the guest speaker asked for. And so no video of it was ever recovered. However, someone in the audience recorded it on their phone surreptitiously.
So someone recorded that, and did that person reach out to you? Or how did you come across this recording?
Yeah, actually, Roland, it was online. It's been online for 5 years. I was just doing my regular daily research for my podcast. I came across it through a chain of links, just following the information. I read a couple of transcripts that he said some things that were damning in terms of the Black community and gun rights. And I followed that to the Aspen Times. And then I just continued searching until I found the audio, the hour-long audio that's been on YouTube for 5 years now.
So when you hear these other outlets, there was somebody who was on CNN who was critical of you. This was just basic reporting.
Yeah, extremely basic. There was no conspiracy. There was nothing planned, right? I mean, it quite literally fell into my lap, but it fell into my lap because I did some basic research. And CNN, they called me out about it, asking questions about my motivations. My motivations was my daily work that I do on my podcast, and I found this audio, cleaned it up. I did the transcript. I did type up the transcript and put the video together, but those are his words.
What do you make of his statement? I saw some of your tweets, and you said simply, this statement is not good enough.
No, it's simply not good enough, because if you listen to what he said at Aspen in 2015, there is a depth. He has a deeply held belief in terms of young Black men. The way he said it, the way it flowed freely from him, he really believes this. And that's not commensurate with his apology in 2019 in December when he began his presidential campaign, or with what he said today, trying to blame it on Donald Trump. Now, I agree, Donald Trump is a preeminent threat and we need to vote him out of office. But these words were by Michael Bloomberg, not Donald Trump. He
apologized in December during an appearance at the church of Pastor A.R. Bernard. Mm-hmm. But as late as January of 2019, he was defending stop and frisk.
Absolutely. This is, and that's the thing that this statement really reveals, right? It reveals his philosophy, what he believes with regards to young Black and brown men, but it also reveals his governing principle, right? Instead of addressing the underlying reasons there's crime, instead of exploring it, addressing poverty, he sends in $8 billion worth of police officers, which he says in the Fuller clip, $8 billion that they spend a year. And so his governing principle is to send in the forces instead of exploring how we can eradicate crime through eradicating poverty. And so this is really the type of mentality that I believe he would take to the White House. So it's problematic, and it doesn't match up with his, it's a half-hearted apology that he gave us.
What's also interesting, when you look at this, in terms of what he said, and others are also saying that, well, we don't know the full context. So the question is here: will the Aspen Institute release the full speech? They recorded it, so clearly that was a recording.
Right. Right. There's a full recording. There is the full 45-minute speech that's on YouTube. I made sure to give the proper context in the clips that I cut up, because I'm like anyone else. I get tired of videos that are taken out of context. But the context is there. He's explaining the justification for why they arrest young men. They arrest young men because that's where they send all the police. They send all the police there because that's where all the crime is. It's fully in context in terms of the conversation of justifying stop and frisk.
So here's what's interesting. When I look at this statement here, again, this is the quote. I inherited the police practice of stop and frisk. By the time I left office, I cut it back 95%. He left office December 31st, 2013. Yet, in August of 2013, a federal judge ruled stop and frisk to be unconstitutional.
Right.
So he gives the impression in his statement that he made the judgment to pull back stop and frisk because of criticisms, when in fact it was a federal judge who declared stop and frisk to be unconstitutional. So it wasn't voluntarily him reducing it. It was the court saying it's unconstitutional.
Right. And Roland, as you mentioned, he defended stop and frisk all the way up until the point he decided to run for president. And so now he's running for president. We get it. He's pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into his campaign, advertisements all across the country. He's portraying himself as the person who can beat Donald Trump. But we still have to ask the question, can he really beat Donald Trump when a guy with a podcast in an hour was able to pull up this kind of information? Imagine what the GOP is going to do to him when they have $1 billion behind their campaign against them. He has questions to answer about this. And I think he is able to apologize. I'm not saying he's not redeemable, but the apology does not match up to the depth of his philosophical worldview with regard to young black men that we saw in that video and that audio clip.
Here's also what I find to be interesting. And again, this is just basic stuff that we do as journalists. So he says, again, he pulls it back in terms of by 95%. Yet, if you actually read the New York Times story, okay, and I'm reading here, and this is for all people who are listening, I want you to hear this. The judge in this case was Shira Scheinlin, okay? Here's a paragraph here that I think is important. In her 195-page decision, Judge Scheinlin concluded that the stops, which soared in number over the last decade as crime continued to decline, demonstrated a widespread disregard for the Fourth Amendment, which protects against unreasonable searches and seizures by the government, as well as the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. This is the New York Times, folks, and the story is dated August 12, 2013, for folks who are following along. Mayor Michael R. Bloomberg angrily accused the judge of deliberately denying the city, quote, a fair trial, unquote, and said the city would file an appeal. Striking a defiant tone, Mr. Bloomberg said, quote, you're not going to see any change in tactics overnight, unquote. He said he hoped the appeal process would allow the current stop and frisk practices to continue through the end of his administration because, quote, I wouldn't want to be responsible for a lot of people dying. This is on the story is dated August 12th, 2013. His term ends December 2013. So here was a man, again, in his statement, he says, I inherited the police practice of stop and frisk, and as part of our effort to stop gun violence, it was overused. By the time I left office, I cut it back by 95%. Yet, the New York Times is quoting him in August of 2013, angrily defending it and saying he wants it to continue. Where's the truth here? Is it in this new statement, or is it in Michael Bloomberg what he said when the judge made her decision?
Right. You could tell from his response to the judge, right, that this is something that was near and dear to him. That's confirmed with the audio that we released. This is something that flows from him as a principled philosophy of what he believes, how he looks at young black men, how he looks at young brown men, and particularly how he thinks the government should be used to rectify the situation. This is what he believes, and it sneaks out. And the question is to see, he distracted. Donald Trump became a distraction today. That's what Donald Trump is a master of, right? But the real question that Michael Bloomberg needs to answer is, does he still believe these things, or does he repudiate his old statements?
The thing for me, let me read some more from the New York Times piece. I just want to get your response. The judge found that for much of the last decade, patrol officers had stopped innocent people without any objective reason to suspect them of wrongdoing.
Right.
But her criticism went beyond the conduct of police officers. In this 195-page ruling, she wrote this: I also conclude that the city's highest officials have turned a blind eye to the evidence that officers are conducting stops in a racially discriminatory manner, citing statements that Mr. Bloomberg and the police commissioner, Raymond W. Kelly, have made in defending the policy.
Yeah.
Here's a judge, and then she later says, if officers believe that the behavior described above constitutes furtive movement that justifies a stop, then it is no surprise that stops so rarely produce evidence of criminal activity. She talked about the human toll of these unconstitutional stops, saying that the plaintiffs testified in terms of their feelings, their beliefs about the cops. She characterized, according to the Times, she characterized each stop, quote, as a demeaning and humiliating experience. No one should live in fear of being stopped whenever he leaves his home to go about the activities of daily life.
Yeah.
Again, I'm reading this, and then I'm juxtaposing it to this statement today after you revealed this audio. And I'm sorry, in real time, we are literally getting an understanding of exactly what Michael Bloomberg thought and felt.
Right. And that's the reason he asked for this video to be blocked, according to the Aspen Times, because he knew this was too revealing. In a moment of improvising, it being extemporaneous in his speech, he revealed who he really was, what he really believes, as well as what you identified in terms of the judge. She was able to use their own words against them. So it's not really enough, this apology tour to become the president of the United States. It's convenient. But the real question is, does he still believe it? Because he has not addressed that yet. His words have betrayed him in that court case, and his words have betrayed him in the Aspen Institute audio.
What do you think Michael Bloomberg needs to do next?
You don't want to ask me that, but at a bare minimum, he needs to give a full-throated apology that reflects a person who has thought as much about the problem he created as he thought about his worldview in terms of looking at young black men, right? He put a lot of thought into how he views black men, and he put a lot of thought in terms of how the government should approach those black men. So if he wants to continue in this presidential campaign, he needs to put a whole hell of a lot more thought into his apology than blaming Donald Trump for it.
All right, Benjamin Dixon, I surely appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Good work.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment. All right, folks, are you looking to enhance your leadership skills? Are you trying to enhance those of your team as well? Well, if so, you should join Reverend Dr. Jackie Hood Martin for her newest online course and mastermind group, How Successful People Think. She'll be your guide as you learn timeless leadership principles to apply to daily living. The offer expires February 28th. To register or start the course online, go to www.live2lead.com/Leesburg. That's www.live, L-I-V-E, the number 2, lead, LEAD.com/Leesburg. Now back to your Roland Martin Unfiltered video. You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it.